get out of the offices, get on the shop floor, get there where things are happening, where you can see live what's going on there, try to understand their problems, their concerns, and lead from the shop floor level and not from the office level. I think this is fundamental if you want to really make change and transformation stick.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Allied Advisors podcast. Today, I'm extremely fortunate. I've got Mr. Winfried Rockensteiner with me today. Mr. Rockensteiner is the Global Vice President of Logistics for Bosch Powertrain Solutions. So he leads an incredibly large organization, a little bit different than most of our listeners in mid-market manufacturing, but I think a lot of the lessons that you learn leading large organizations are definitely applicable to the mid-market, and maybe even there's some tips leading big groups that can help some of our mid-market listeners sharpen their skills and be a little bit more effective in their leadership journey. So, Mr. Rockensteiner, thanks again for joining. If you don't mind, maybe give the folks at home maybe a little background on your work journey and your career path and what you're up to.
Yeah, Justin, thanks very much for having me today. It's a pleasure of actually attending this podcast session. Extremely pleased to actually share a few insights of what we're actually doing at Bosch Power Solutions to transform our logistic organization processes in the context also of the market changes. Yeah, a little bit background to me and myself. I'm actually working for Bosch more than 30 years, so it's quite a long time. And I've actually started in a company or entity called Blaupunkt. At that time, it was the leading manufacturer of car radios 30 years ago. This company, meanwhile, is gone, but it was part of the Bosch organization, Bosch automotive organization. And actually, I started as a production planner, doing production planning for my customers, Volkswagen, BMW. And then I had the opportunity to actually take on more responsibility, different areas, logistic, IT, and also had the opportunity and the privilege to work for 5 years in the US, in Detroit. And therefore, this was a special experience for me. Probably the most productive and most innovative time of my career, because in the US you can do things which you can't do somewhere else. People are much more open for new things and innovation. It was really an exciting time at this time, from 2001 to 2006. And until now, I've actually led different organizations within the Bosch organization. And since 5 years, I'm in charge of Bosch Power Solutions, as we call it now, logistic and supply chain management. Bosch Power Solutions is the biggest Bosch automotive division. We have about 20 billion euros of sales to our automotive customer. And we run worldwide about 45 production sites in basically all regions. In the US, we have plants in Anderson, in Charleston, in Albion. So therefore, I'm quite familiar with this area, and have been many times to the US, and I'm looking forward to actually visit this great country again. So this is great opportunity. And actually now we are actually also undergoing, as many of other industry companies, a big transformation process. We're seeing massive changes on the markets with the transformation from combustion engine to electrification, specifically with focus on China and Asia, but also in Europe. We see the transformation going on. And for sure, this transformation also has severe impact on our business setup, on our processes, and our organization. And therefore, this is a a challenging but also exciting time.
Yeah, as a former Boschler, so it's funny. I had this conversation the other day with another, lean consultant, and he asked me, he said, you know, Justin, you and I work a lot with mid-market manufacturers, and we see people trying to do this transformational journey, right? These lean transformations. And most of the time, they're not successful. He's like, do you really think bigger companies, and really, he was talking 200, 300, 400 employees, which of course Bosch is way bigger. But do you think these companies with 300, do you think it's possible to do these big transformation projects? And my answer was, yeah, I absolutely think it's possible because I saw it happen at Bosch, right? I mean, I saw the transformation that we had even in my short time in Bosch Charleston, how we went from, a paper-based process to the digital transformation really within 9 years. And it wasn't an easy process. It wasn't it wasn't quick, but we were successful. In your experience, Mr. Rockensteiner, what do you think drives those transformational changes? Is it the market? Is it leadership's own internal realization that, hey, we got to do something here. What we're doing isn't working. What do you think is the biggest catalyst for those types of changes?
The biggest catalyst definitely are the changing market conditions. So we as a company, and I think this is a challenge for all your listeners, for all companies which actually act in this industrial production one, we have to constantly adjust to the changing market conditions because at the end of the day, we have to serve our customers. And if the customer base is changing, their behavior is changing, then we as an organization have to adapt. The challenge is that if you are not ahead of the transformation wave, it's becoming a little bit cumbersome and a little bit, let's say, difficult to actually perform this transformation. So yes, it's based on changing market conditions, but you also have to include in your strategy already the idea of transforming your business because you always have to consider there are constantly changes on the markets going on. And we as an organization, we have to anticipate the changes and anticipate what actually, what kind of impact that will have on us as a company, on us as human being, on us as an organization. And I think this is the trick. This is the challenge, to be ahead and to anticipate what's going on and to start this transformation early enough. Because if you are too late, then it becomes really, really difficult. And referring to your second question and your remark, Justin, I think it's not a question of size, this kind of transformation journeys. We have also small entities in our organization, plants with 300, 400 associates. And for sure, they are part of a bigger organization, but they are, in many cases, they are actually leading the transformation process because they are smaller, they're more adaptive. And therefore, size is not something which decides the transformation process. So definitely, there's a great opportunity also for your listeners, your mid-sized company listeners in this topic. But you have to start early enough. You have to anticipate what's going to change on the customer side. And you have to look from a holistic point of view on that. So holistic means for me, it's not a question of changing an IT system. It's not a question of changing and adapting an organization. It's not a question of changing processes. It's all of that. So if you want to transform your business and make your operations and your business more reliable, more successful, more cost competitive, more resilient, you have to look at the different aspects of transformation. And as I said, this is not a single topic. there are many, many things which you have to consider, and it's also a journey. It's not a one-time event. It's a journey which will probably need a couple of years to do that. And I think this is something many companies do not properly consider in their approach.
The time, you mean, the time it takes.
The time it takes, and yes, also the complexity of the different aspects of the transformation process.
100%. I agree with that. It feels like most mid-market manufacturers look at these big transformational changes and they think it's a 3-month, a 6-month, it's a short project. They look at it almost as if it's just a set of tasks that need to be completed. And
yes.
and I'm trying to tell them, no, it's not. It's not tasks. This is a paradigm shift, right? This is a complete model shift for how you run your business. And, sometimes I see the hardest part of that is getting the people on board. And I don't mean the shop floor folks or the engineers. I mean the top level executives, right? Getting them on board with the change. How do you approach that in your career? How do you get those top level folks to get on board and really try to understand the vision and really support the change?
Justin, you are absolutely right. And it just came to my mind that I read an article about transformation. And in this article, there was mentioned that transformation mainly is a question of cultural change and also the aspect of how to lead people. And if you look at successful transformation journeys, I personally believe, and has also been confirmed, we have done a quite successful journey, about our journey in the area of supply chain management, Bosch Power Solutions. You have to define the purpose why you do that in your strategy. You have to make sure that you define this purpose, that you also explain this purpose in a very simple and transparent way to your associates. This is very important because otherwise you will not get them on board. So they need to understand why this change is necessary. A second important topic is if you explain that this change is required, you should not just look at the threats and the risks. In many cases, these changes and this transformation also offers a lot of opportunities, specifically also for your associates and the company itself. And I think it's very, very important to focus on these positive points of this change. And this is what I mean with cultural aspect of transformation. You need to somehow sell this transformation journey in a positive way, that this is basically necessary to ensure the future of the company, and that there's also a lot of positive aspects in this journey which help your associates to further develop and to secure jobs and to continue a hopefully successful journey of a company. And this is for me very, very important. And this is also a key part of the cultural change, which you need to include in your transformation strategy.
Yeah, as a former Boschler that worked under your organization, I always got excited about, the direction the company was going in terms of new technologies we were trying to implement, new strategies we were trying to use to try to drive efficiency improvements and drive cost savings. They were new, they were cutting edge, they were fresh, and they were challenging. They were something you could really sink your teeth into and really showcase, what you could do. And I think that does inspire a lot of folks. And I think that does get overlooked, to your point, right? That ability to sell it to the group and to get them excited about the vision is often, I think, overlooked in top level leadership teams.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why culture and cultural change is so essential in this context.
Yeah.
You need to really look for the purpose why you're doing that, and then explain and communicate to your associates. Also, the topic of communication in our transformation journey is really, really important. Yeah, it's not just a one-time communication to say now we're starting this transformation journey and then we stop the communication. No, it's a permanent challenge to keep the people, your organization up to date. What's going on? What's the status of the different projects you have started? What are the first results which you can see in order to keep the people excited about that? And this permanent communication, this tailor-made communication towards your associates, your stakeholders, is also very, very important to include your associates in this communication journey. Yeah, for example, by using methodologies like soundings that you frequently ask your people about their opinion, that they can reflect on what's going on and that they are becoming part of this change process. Very important aspect of cultural change and transformation.
Yeah, I think you got to lead from the front, right? You've got to be visible. If you're driving these big changes within an organization, you have to be seen as the person driving the change.
Exactly.
You can't go out there to the troops and say, hey, we're going to do it, and then walk behind the lines and nobody sees you again. Like, you got to be visible. You got to be engaged. To me, to be successful in these transformational initiatives. Otherwise, people figure out really quick what's important to the boss and what's not.
Yes, sure. This is also important that you are leading this this process as an example. That you start with yourself, questioning what you are doing and whether this is still beneficial for the organization, and don't expect your associates to change if you as a leader are not able to adapt and change. So this is a very, very important part of this transformation process. Start as a leader, being a role model, also taking risks. Yeah, not every change is welcomed in the organization. So you have to also expect some headwind. And you will find a lot of people who will tell you, we don't want to do that, or it will never work. But you have to be consistent about what you want to do. You have to have a vision about how you want to do things. And you have to have a kind of good and well-developed feeling about your associates. How much can you actually ask them to change? What are the steps of change which you can actually ask them to do? So it's also something which should be included in your leadership model.
Yeah, I like how you said that, right? I mean, there's going to be headwinds. Meg Lanza and I were chatting a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and we both talked about how important it is that leaders are willing to take the slings and arrows and still push forward. Being willing to correct, right? If you see that you're on the wrong path, you got to be willing to correct, but not to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, to borrow
Exactly.
right? You got to see it through to the end.
Absolutely. And therefore, you have to, as a leader, you have to challenge yourself. You have to put yourself on the spotlight, and you also have to be able to admit if you make mistakes, to correct those mistakes. And that makes it, this is a kind of leadership which also, let's say, your associates will like that.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
You're part of this journey, and you don't ask them to do something which you're not doing by yourself. So right. I think this is very, very important.
Sincerity goes a long way, and I think that's cross-cultural. I don't care if you're in Germany or US or Asia. Sincerity really does matter, and people can pick up on it. So.
Absolutely, sincerity is key, and it's independent of cultures. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
If you're sincere in what you're doing, people will follow you.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So changing gears a little bit, I've got a podcast coming out, I think this week, with an AI consultant talking about, the future of AI in manufacturing and what we think is going to happen. What's your perspective on that? Do you think AI is going to be the paradigm shattering watershed moment, or do you think it's going to be a more subtle change, at least to start with, until it builds some steam and starts growing, economies of scale? Where do you think it's going to go? Let's say in the short term and maybe the midterm.
My personal belief is that AI will have a fundamental impact on the way how we run our companies. And it will have a fundamental impact on the competence model and the roles within our organization. My personal belief is that within the next 5 years, we will most likely lose between 30 and 50% of the, let's say, indirect jobs in our companies. For example, in supply chain management, my expectation is that a significant number of so-called planner jobs will go away, because this will be done in the future by an artificial intelligence application. And it will come quite fast. So I don't think that it'll take more than 3 to 4 years to see these significant impacts. And by the way, we in Bosch, we already see that. Yeah, we see that we need less and less people, specifically in the indirect area, in the administration areas, and because artificial intelligence is basically replacing those jobs. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, how do we as an organization adjust to that? So jobs with a lot of repetitive work content, this will go away. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we will see more people who have to deal with so-called deviations, or we call it event-based working. So people have to not to repeat and to do this repetitive work. People in the future have to deal with problems and problem solving much more than it is today. And we need people who actually are able to do these jobs in the future. This means that we need also change in the competence of our associates. Going away from, yeah.
I just want to ask you one thing. I see the same future that you see in terms of demand for administrative roles. I like planners, even on the finance side, folks that are doing repetitive tasks, every day to keep the organization running. I do see that demand going down. Do you see that on the direct headcount side, on the actual guys on the shop floor, turning wrenches, running the machines? I don't see it there quite yet. I think I think those guys are probably still necessary. I don't.
Yes, to a certain extent, yes. I mean, we will see also in the operation environment more and more robots being introduced, and that will replace manual work. But the big impact of AI will happen in indirect areas, as said. So here, and this area was not touched in the past by digitalization that much. So we digitalized our supply chain and our operations, and we digitalized our machines, and the operators at the machine had to operate all of a sudden 3 machines, and before that we had 3 operators operating 3 machines. So in the operation area, we have already seen this kind of impact of digitalization. But now the impact will actually happen in the indirect areas, and this will have require fundamental change how we actually run our processes in our organization. And to be honest with you, we have not really fully thought through these topics. But again, as I said at the beginning, it's not that you just implement an AI algorithm. This Correct. Is not AI. AI is also part of the transformation process, and AI will fundamentally change our organization. It will fundamentally change the competence of our associates. It will fundamentally change our leadership behavior, which is clear as well. It will fundamentally change our process landscape. So there are many, many aspects of AI which in the upcoming years have to be discussed, and we really have to look from a holistic point of view on what AI is doing, and the impact of AI in our operation environment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, Larry Collette, the AI consultant that we talked to in the last episode, one of the things that he pointed out, and I think that's right, just with my limited experience with, generative AI, ChatGPT, Grok, is that AI is not going to replace the expertise, right? I'm not going to become an accounting firm because of ChatGPT, right? Because I don't know anything about accounting. You're always, right now, for the foreseeable future, you're going to need that expert in the loop to verify that whatever the AI model is generating is actually correct, right? That keep on track. You got to treat it almost more like a team member, not a sole, team in and of itself.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I read an interesting article a couple of weeks ago in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, which is a fairly renowned newspaper here in Switzerland. And they actually had a very interesting article, published an article about the impact of AI on schools, and how the role of teachers changing, with AI and the digital tools and social media, which is now being used by the students. And it was really, really eye-opening for me, because the teacher as a know-how person, the one who always knew everything and had an advantage to compare to his students, this is not anymore the case, because the knowledge is stored in AI tools or in social media. You can go to ChatGPT and ask questions. The system will tell you exactly what you want to know. So for knowledge transfer, the teacher is not needed anymore. Interesting aspect, yeah. So his role is now changing. He's the one who actually has to teach his students how to review in a critical and in a critical way the results which are being produced by these artificial intelligence, social media, things like that. So to educate his students how to deal with the information. And this is a different aspect compared to his former role. And so, and if you transfer that into the operation environment, the leadership and the expert role is also changing from a know-how manager more to a kind of critical reviewer of different aspects. And this is, I think, something which really we need to look into, that how this turns out and what does it really mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think I told my wife this the other day. Like, I tell anybody that doesn't use AI, you should. It's like having a brilliant best friend, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want, I can go to ChatGPT and it tells me, right? I mean, my sister just moved to Washington, D.C., and we want to plan a trip up there to visit. Hey, please act as a travel agent and plan a it's great. It's useful for all kinds of things. And it is definitely going to change the way we learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Going back to the leadership topic, like we touched on this in the beginning of the conversation, but a lot of organizations start these lean initiatives, right? These transformational initiatives, and the starting it, that's real easy, right? They have a big meeting, there's a presentation, maybe they do a town hall, and everybody comes for the kickoff. But sustaining these initiatives, I see it in my job every day, is very, 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 very difficult for these organizations to do. What has made you successful doing these types of transformations in your career? And what have you seen at an organizational level that you look at? I have my opinions on why I think Bosch was successful, but when you look at the transformation that you've seen in your career at Bosch, what makes those changes stick?
A good question. I think these changes will only stick, and the transformation will only stick if you are able to integrate those changes into your team setup, if you are able to create enthusiasm about those changes, and that the people consider that as useful for their daily life, for their daily work life, as a useful change. People will resist to change if they don't see a personal advantage in this whole topic. And therefore, focusing on this user experience in the change, making sure that people are really getting excited about what you're doing, what you want to change, and why do you want to change it. And I think this makes transformation changes stick, as you said. Mm-hmm. If you're not able to create enthusiasm in your organization, if you're not creating the culture, this change culture which you need, then you will not be successful. If you base your changes just on rules and regulations and reports, you will not be successful. It's the question of, how do I sell this to my associates, and how do I create this enthusiasm about change and transformation that really makes it stick.
How do you sustain that enthusiasm over the long term? I mean,
it's almost a philosophical question.
So here's where I'm coming from. Right?
Yeah.
From my perspective, just on the lean manufacturing, lean warehousing, most mid-market manufacturers, my experience, the story goes like this. They start making a widget, right? And in the beginning, they have all of this capacity and very little demand. But their widget's really nice, and people like this widget, so it sells. And at some point, that demand starts bumping up against that capacity, and now their ways of doing it, and the way of doing it is just, we're going to work really hard, and we're going to get these parts out the door, and I don't care what you do, we're going to ship. That's not scalable, right? They can't get to that next, level of growth using those methodologies. So they have to implement things that are really hard to get excited about, right? Standards, layered process audit, tricks. It's really hard to get or keep folks excited about making that change when they've been able to really kind of go in there and make it up as they go along each day to get the parts out. How do you sustain enthusiasm with that when it's just hard to be excited about that?
My experience is those organizations and those leaders which have, let's say, inherited the shop floor leadership principles of lean, and are really leading on the shop floor and not in the office. Mm-hmm. These are, from my perspective, the most successful operation companies. You don't lead change, you don't lead transformation, you don't lead lean initiatives from an office space. You have to be on the shop floor, you have to be with a team, you have to work jointly on those topics. The Japanese organizations, if you look at them, this is a perfect example for me. They spend 85 to 90% of their working time on the shop floor, even top management. Yeah, they are not sitting in their nice offices with secretaries and things like that. No, they spend their time on the shop floor, reviewing what's going on there, because very often reality on the shop floor is very different to what you are being told in meeting rooms. Based on my experience, significant difference. So my 100%. Advice and recommendation is, if you really want to live the change, if you want to really live the change and the transformation and the lean principles, get out of the offices, get on the shop floor, get there where things are happening, where you can see live what's going on there. Take your time to review that with your associates. Try to understand their problems, their concerns, and lead from the shop floor level and not from the office level. I think this is fundamental if you really want to stick, if you want to really make change and transformation stick. Absolutely.
100% agree. I mean, that is what I thought Bosch did exceptionally well. When we did all of the change initiatives that I was a part of during my time, the leadership understood, and the leadership was out there on the shop floor. They were the ones, doing, daily leadership routines. They were supporting on the process confirmation piece. I mean, they were really involved. You couldn't go into a meeting room and blow smoke, right? Because they were out there too. They knew what was going on, and that was really the difference.
Well, I'll give you an example. Yeah? We are just in the process of implementing SAP S/4HANA, which is a big transformation, IT transformation from the R3 environment to the new S4.
Mm-hmm.
And we just went live with one of our plants in December, January 24, 25. So over Christmas and New Year. And we have been quite successful in doing that. And one of the key success factors was that the top management spent the critical time during Christmas and New Year with the IT experts, with the shop floor people on site on the shop floor. So they also committed themselves to this project. They went there. They didn't stay at home for Christmas or New Year Eve or things like that. So they spent the time together with the team, trying to understand what's going on. They're trying to support them in solving problems. And this was one of the big success factors.
And I think that type of behavior, it goes back to that sincerity topic. People see that. All levels of the team see that. And then that makes them, hey, you know what? If the boss is out here on Christmas Eve working on this, then I'm going to be out here too, right? Then I'm not too good to do it as well. So I think
exactly.
I agree.
And this is how you create a team spirit, and this is how you actually then also lead these kind of things. Yeah? And good teams are always teams with a flat hierarchy, and the boss and the supervisors, they're an integral part of the team, and they are not the ones who give advice or directions. They see their role as a support role. And this is also requires a change in mindset of a manager. Yeah? The managers have to become coaches, and enable the people and the teams to perform on the best level. This is their role.
There was a story that my good friend Chad Freeman used to tell about his early days at Bosch, and rest his soul. Chad was a wonderful person, but Chad used to, at this time, Chad was the manager of the logistics engineers, and they had developed all these routes, and the operations team was telling them, hey, these routes, you can't do them, right? They can't be executed. And there was a lot of back and forth. So finally, Chad and the engineering team, they went out there and ran the routes, right? They were driving tuggers, delivering Kanbans. They were doing it. And come to find out that the operations team was right. You couldn't run the routes. They were moving, I forget, it's like 20,000 pounds of material every day. And Chad told that story all the time about how it was important to get out there and do it and see, so that you could actually make changes and make these things work. And anyway, I always think of that. I always remember Chad, but I always think of that story. And he was right, that you got to get out there. You got to do it yourself. You got to see what works and what doesn't, and you got to be willing to adjust.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, very often, this is one of my lessons, but very often reality is different to what you are getting told in a meeting room. People which present you slides, they present you their view on reality. It's not the reality happening outside. It's their view on things. And you have to actually challenge that by taking the time and say, now let's go to the shop floor. Let's see how it works, or what are the options which we have. And very often you find a different truth. A different truth if you go out there and see it by yourself, check it by yourself. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. It is. It's an eye-opening experience.
Absolutely.
Mr. Rockensteiner, final question, but most of our listeners are coming from a mid-market manufacturing background, right? They're not coming
Mm.
from a company the size of the Bosch with the resources. What lessons do you think that you've learned in your career that you're currently employing in your role at Bosch that scale down and work well for a company selling 100 million or maybe 250 million a year or less? What can they take from your experience?
Well, it really depends on the topic. I think mid-sized companies, they have a great advantage because they are much more, let's say, hands-on, more agile compared to big companies like Bosch. Yeah. Yes, we probably have more resources. We spend more money on that. But mid-sized companies are much more flexible and agile in what they are doing. The key principles which they have to follow is clearly create this cultural of change. Yeah, make sure that it's really a culture change and not just a change of IT system, or if you put in a new machine, you expect that everything right now. It's a cultural change. So, and this is true for mid-sized companies as well. So make sure that you start this cultural change. Make sure that you define properly the purpose why you're doing that, and that you explain this to your associates. This is key for big companies, but also key for mid-sized companies. You need to have your team being part of this change process, this change story. And as I said, I personally believe that these mid-sized companies have a very sound base for doing that. Yeah. And if you want to get access to certain, let's say, methodologies and probably latest and greatest about AI, I think mid-sized companies should team up more to do it together and to also utilize resources in a joint manner. Yeah, so that not everybody has to invent everything. That they have a kind of exchange forum where they can use things which have been developed in one company for the benefit of another company, but that requires that you start this kind of collaboration, this kind of best practice exchange in an environment where you can trust the environment. But especially for these mid-sized companies, I think this kind of learning network can be very, very powerful. Yeah? We use that as well within our company, in my organization. Today, if we want to resolve a problem, we are not actually setting up a kind of project team or a kind of functional organization. We usually create networks, people which have interest in this topic, which are willing to contribute, which are willing to work together. And we've seen amazing results. Yeah, if you bring people together who are following the same strategy, the same purpose, and if you team them up, if you orchestrate this network a little bit, amazing results are coming out of that. And I think this is an idea which also could be used by mid-sized companies. Why not?
There's actually a network here in South Carolina that
Yeah,
does just that, right? It's called the Off Exchange, right? It's
yeah,
headed up by South
yeah.
Carolina Manufacturers Extension Partnership. Mike Demos is the name of the guy that runs it. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, benchmarking is such a critical piece of development. We implemented so many cool technologies back in my days at Bosch that we saw in Germany at the lead plants over in,
Yeah.
Hamburg, Bleica. We would bring it back and we would do it in Charleston. And it was great because you had a resource. You didn't have to create everything from scratch. You had a partner that you could call and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. What did you struggle with it? How did you resolve it?" It really was game changing. I agree.
Yeah, and the interesting observation which we have now is, yes, you're right. In the past, people actually came to Germany to learn and to see and to transfer things. But now we also see that we have to go from Germany into the regions to learn there, because to be honest with you, in Asia, in China, things are being done much faster than in Germany. We can learn from the US, we can learn from China, we can learn from Japan, and to set up these international networks, these know-how networks, which are driven by a certain purpose. This is a very, very powerful idea. And this is also a change which we're currently seeing in our organization. You know? Not everything is anymore invented in Germany. No, we have to actually accept that in other regions, organizations are faster, they have less rules, less boundaries, and so we need to learn from them. This is also a cultural change for our German colleagues here.
Well, Mr. Rockensteiner, thanks again for carving out the time to come and talk with us today. I know how busy you are, so I really do appreciate it. If folks at home want to follow you, is LinkedIn the best place, or how can they reach you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will share most of the things which I'm doing. I'm sharing via LinkedIn, so more than welcome to connect. I'm looking forward for some of your listeners to connect with me. I'm also eager to learn from them what they are doing and to hear from them. So great, and I will also distribute then this podcast in my network, Justin, so that we also, let's say, benefit from this session together.
That sounds great. I really appreciate that. And the folks at home, if you enjoyed the conversation today, please do like and subscribe. Leave a 5-star review on iTunes. It really does help the show. It helps us get out there and reach more people. But again, Mr. Rockensteiner, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time.
Justin, thank you very much and all the best. Thank you.
Yep. Take care.